Hi. My goodness, I look mighty trimmed, much improved. Well, I wanted today to talk to you a little bit about institutional craziness and merely to reminisce about a moment back from academic days and see if anyone has some comparable stories they can tell about their workplaces or organizations, just so we can all sort of bathe in the misery and mirth. What do I mean? Well, I will tell you that when I started working at DePaul University in 1999, I received, incidentally, my PhD in zoology in 1997 and went on to a prof job in Valdosta University for a year in Georgia. And then by design, came to Chicago, a city that I loved, uh, and solicited work and found it at two universities and chose the one I preferred. So, anyway, I began at DePaul and stayed there until 2014. Full time most of the time. For those of you who care about these things, I was in a strange position. It was not tenure track, but it was built to set up for an eventual evolution into a permanent position that was not in the tenure zone. And the idea was to sort of create a real job for being a prof, if you will, in which you didn't have to kind of sing for your supper through the that specific promotion process. The hope in, I don't know, 2000, 2001 was actually that this was going to become a national trend. That died a few years later, but I was one of those. Anyway, it kind of meant it was cool. I got to be a prof, not a lecturer, not a whatever. It was not an adjunct position. It was full time and it was professor. It just wasn't in that ladder. And for those of you who are interested, it required a little bit of non traditional shenanigans, but it was ongoing. I didn't get booted, as the tradition is. All right. Well, as it turns out, more importantly, one of the greatest things about DePaul, one of the things that I really loved was when I started working there, they had a sliding scale of tuition so that your tuition was income dependent. So it wasn't really about seeking scholarships if you were lower income. That's just what your tuition was. Number one. Number two, that I had an immense amount of freedom in general for teaching, but specifically in the first year program. Now, for those of you who don't know, very definitely a product of the University of Chicago, as if you couldn't tell. As I say, the stench does not wash off. But this was back in the Hutchinsonian days of the famous Common Core. And I was a huge fan of the Common Core and still am. And what DePaul had was effectively a tacit Common Core. They called it the first year program. Had some great stuff in it. It had a fantastic writing sequence. It had a fantastic numeracy sequence called quantitative reasoning, which was just deeply superior to anything I'd ever seen to get people kind of into the zone of numerical competence. And it had a number of others. One was called Explore Chicago, where you used the city as a classroom, among other things. And I taught a course on rats for a really long time. And it was great. I really loved my rats class. And then there was also a focal point seminar, which was effectively kind of a what you would think of as an advanced course. It was just for first year students. And it was always interdisciplinary. It involved a lot of presenting, writing, discussion-based learning, and stuff like that. And I taught that too, like a madman. Like, I don't know, 30 times I taught that through the course of 14 years there. And I can talk about the contents of those, but that's not really the point. The point was that I could do as I wished, and people did. Like a really good example of the focal point seminar, there was one prof who did one on chess. And he did everything. I mean, with chess, the whole history thing, the sort of strategic, literal, leisure game competition theory stuff, and mathematics, and a whole variety of other cool things. that you could just keep mining, keep dissecting chess as a human phenomenon, and just the world unfolds at your feet. And it was a good example. I mean, there was tons of these, though. Every prof got to do their own, whatever they felt like doing for them. So, I mean, just imagine that as a first-year student, this enormous tapestry of, cool shit, basically. And everybody had to take an Explore Chicago. Everybody had to take a focal point. Everybody, and it's requirements. You had to do these things. Whatever you placed into for the writing, that's the sequence that you took. Well, anyways, that freedom is what I'm talking about. It was a young program. The Explore Chicago program had started with a sort of summer version called Discover Chicago. The program, the first year program, had kind of grown around that until right when I started, it sort of had hit its stride as, okay, this is how it relates to the rest of the school. And the two people who had founded it were, hardly, they're pretty much my age, and they were, afire with wrath and hope. And so I really, really liked the student mentors in Explore Chicago who were, they had their own little subsection of the class that they taught themselves. And it was very much about coping with being a college student, coping with admin, coping with your choices and stuff like that. And they had a lot of freedom too, which I cultivated. Those early student mentors, where they were just the badasses. They were troublemakers, people who had been through ups and downs in their college career. They were, never forget, my early ones. They were completely, fearless in terms of what they could and couldn't say and what they thought would be most useful to these first year students, and say, look, I don't represent the administration. I'm telling you what I think. And I just thought I encouraged that immensely. You had the option to attend your student mentors' presentations or class parts. And I always said, no, look, I want you to have freedom from me. You need to be able to establish your relationship with these students. And you guys, the students need to know that you're not going to come running to me with stuff they say. And if you want me to be there for this or that exercise or something, just let me know. So anyway, I really liked all of that, and I worked hard with different student mentors in different ways. Okay, what am I on about? I mean, because this is great, right? I mean, this sounds like the heaven on earth, college prof-wise, and in many ways it was. And what happened? Well, lots of things happened infrastructurally for the school, particularly around 2006 and 2007. And I could go into some of the issues about that. It's kind of a big deal, actually, and plays into a lot of my own activism and is quite insightful. It's very interesting to be somebody who is actually a professor, but isn't in fear of tenure and didn't go through the tenure process, which I maintain is largely intellectually and socially chilling, rather than freeing. The stereotype, of course, the tenured prof gets to do whatever they want. Now, the tenured prof is beaten down, destroyed, frozen out, and brain blasted into compliance in every possible way. They wouldn't have got there otherwise. And so I was very different, and it also meant that the admin couldn't do anything about me. I was gainfully employed by the department, and I had broken no actual rules by anything, and so I did say what I wanted. I got to act like a tenured prof is stereotypically expected to act, and I did. All right. Well, as time went by, the school, however, those administrative bureaucratic changes were extremely hardcore. As I like to say, the new board of trustees and the administration that they ushered in, they wanted the school to be Northwestern, and they wanted it in the worst way, and that's how they went about it. They shifted, the tuition structure upward and uniform. They aimed their promotion at a very different sector instead of a citywide, spectrum of students. They aimed for people who they could basically rely on for that kind of tuition, and they really focused on lifestyle. Oh, the buildings that went up. Why universities nationwide suddenly invested in construction all through the 2000s? Oh, we could talk about that. But they did. And the buildings that went up and their huge swooping lobbies and their curving walls and the extraordinary lack of functional space. The extraordinary, and my classroom's just getting shittier and shittier. Some of my classrooms were the new Spiff in 1999. By 2008, they were pretty sad. We never actually got those sockets for plugins for computers. This is all before Ethernet. They built them into the stanchions in the lab, the teaching labs that I used, but they were dummies. They were going to be hooked up someday. They never were, just to give you an idea. Right. Well, anyway, so all that's going on, and the school is undergoing sort of a traumatic reshuffling in a variety of ways for all these things. They start basically gutting the first year program in a lot of ways, and what really happens is it gets standardized. All of a sudden, the student mentors are given a set schedule for the quarter of what they are supposed to cover, and specifically the messaging. When the students came in, the mentors came in, and they started giving this kind of promo speech about Vision 2012 and all this that the school, the admin, was promoting as their big push, and these students are basically parroting the promotion. And I was saying, what on earth are you talking about that nonsense for? And they would say, well, it's in our little curriculum that we're supposed to do. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's not what the student mentor does. You're not the follow-up to the student tour guide during recruitment week. You're not the bookend for that, are you? And apparently, yes, they were. So that's one thing, sort of the start of the what I could see coming. And then a big thing that happened was the shift into what you do with a promote. I'm not saying this right. When you want to propose a class for the first year program, what do you have to do? Now, coming in when I did, when the whole thing is just like, has the bloom of spring upon it, the answer was, I don't know. What are you going to do? Tell me how it goes. And that was it. Here, you had to, because I wanted to do a new Explore Chicago. I knew I was going to be leaving academia. I had another year or two, and I said, let's do a new, let's liven things up. And I came up with a really good idea about birth and death in Chicago, and had all sorts of cool notions. All the things you could do, right? Going to the funeral homes and going to the hospitals or birthing places, and all the data, sociological, all the biology, of course, right? So this is fantastic. And I get to work on this, and I say, all right, I call them up. I say, hey guys, I want to do a different course. And they said, well, you fill this out. This is this horse choker of course summary in which you have to give a full week by week description of the content. You have to give the readings that you're going to assign. You had to come up with like a justification of every assessment method. In week so-and-so, we're going to do a presentation, and the criteria for the student success are blah, blah, blah. It was really, really detailed. Anybody who's ever taught a college class, particularly one in which you have considerable freedom, that your ideas for what you're going to present are a polite joke until they encounter the living, breathing, obstreperous or baffled presence of actual people. And again and again, I remember the first time I taught college level statistics, and about a third into it, I told the students, my prep for this class, it stinks. You guys, it's not working, and you guys are all perfectly capable. Clearly I didn't know how to set up a stats course. So I'm going to go home. and I'm going to come back on Monday, and it's going to be the new syllabus from this point forward, new testing methods, the works, and that's what's happening. Well, that's a pretty extreme example, but there have been others where I'd looked at what I was doing and saying, this is going to change. This reading is too much for these particular students. That's one coming up. No, I got to find a different kind of approach. The way I'm testing clearly is terrible. We're going to come up with a different way. All these things. This is normal. This is the kind of dynamic, and on a slower level from quarter to term to term to term too. I mean, you really, even if you get really good at teaching this class, I guarantee you after the 5th or 6th time, you're slacking, you're coasting, and you got to go back and you got to look and use real metrics and use real notions of how this is working out for your students' learning. And a lot of the times you say, yeah, that was a good run for that class in that way, but I have to blowtorch it. I've got to start over and how I'm going to do this for any number of reasons. Okay, so anyway, I'm doing this. I'm looking at this massive tome of stuff to fill out and saying, and I called them again. I went to the office and I was like, are you guys insane? You know that, whatever I write in here is going to get junked. They said, it's okay, but you have to do it anyway. I was like, wow, the times have changed. So I went and I suffered through that and submitted it. And sure enough, by the way, they're grandiose notions of the students, for the proper Explore Chicago, the students will have written 100 pages of responsive, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, these students are going to operate to their capacity. I'm going to push them to their capacity. That's how much they're going to write. They can't write more than that. And I'm not going to have them write less, but we don't know what that cap is for this class, for students at this level coming in. You can't teach the students that you've got in your head. You've got to teach the ones you've got. So what is this nonsense? What happened to you guys? So that was, really grim. I fought them on that and I did not win, and I had to go through with it, and it was just really annoying. And the change up on the class, of course, was harder because what you present to the class for what you're going to do looks very, very contractual in that form. And if you change it up on them, the students are like, they don't see that as normal or considerate or responsive. They see it as incompetent. And you're just going, man. So how about the last straw? I shall tell you the last straw. And this may have been the last year. So 2013 to 2014, is that correct? It was my last year, or last school year. And that would mean that it would be in the spring of 2013 that I attended my last Get Ready for Your Explore Chicago term meeting in the spring. And that's where you learn who your student mentor is, and that's where you learn all kinds of things, really. And I usually would happily go to the meeting and find out, what was up. And you got to meet, a lot of the new profs would be teaching those courses. And it was nice to meet new profs in that context because you were kind of the guy who'd been doing this for 10 or 11 years, and they're interested. They're like, this is crazy. I never taught a course like this. I'm like, well, I'll tell you what I think. So it was nice. You're meeting profs all the way across the curriculum, not just in your department or discipline and its relationships. So, I liked it. I go this time and it's all different. It is way corporate. And we're in this real sterile room in the new student center, and it doesn't look anything or smell anything like, the cool ass places where we used to just gather for this meeting. And there's a monster screen and the PowerPoint goes up, and the person presenting is half my age, and it was a new hire at the Explore Chicago program. And no great disrespect to her, but she was way out of her depth, and she was, terrified reading off a set of notes, had really no idea, what this all was. And here's what was in the presentation. It was a screenshot of the website, the front page of the website. And it had like the different tabs about the first year program and the Explore Chicago thing. And it had, each of the tabs in the website has an explanation. And there was a handout, and guess what was on the handout but a repeat of the explanation. Now, this is a website anybody can go to. So it's not as though any of us couldn't have just clicked on it in our office and checked it out. But no, we had to have it up on this huge screen. We had this poor person here kind of stammering out what was on it, and we had to have this piece of paper which said exactly the same thing. This was in our packet because we each got a cool packet. And in the packet were 2 pieces of paper. This was one of them. And at this point, there's another prof that had been doing these classes from my department, and he and I were friends. And I don't know, the chances of him ever seeing this are slim. But Anthony, hey, if you're out there, you remember this. And here was the thing. Our student mentors were at the meeting too, and each of them was given 30, because there's 30 students in this class, 30 water bottles, like tote water bottles, not very expensive ones, but 30. I mean, that's a lot of clanking plastic. They just kind of handed 30 of these and said, okay, these are for your students. And I'm like, wait, for next fall? Okay. And, I remember my student mentors looking at me like, what am I going to do with these? And then, do you know what was on the second piece of paper? The second piece of paper was a list, not a map, mind you, but a list by building on campus of all of the, as they called it on the piece of paper, water bottle refill stations. The water fountains. Somebody had gone around campus and had noted down the location of every single water fountain, and they summarized it on this piece of paper. And I'm thinking to myself, when was hydration identified as the single most challenging aspect of first-year student life on a college campus? Who decided that the student mentor in the Explore Chicago program is the point person to solve this problem? How exactly are they supposed to, I don't know, make that happen? Right? They're going to hand the students the water bottles, and they're going to pass out enough if I'm thirsty, right? And I'm looking at my water bottle, which apparently is the only source of fluid, that I could possibly have. I'm looking at my water bottle, and I'm thirsty. And then I'm supposed to dig out this piece of paper that my student mentor gave me. I'm this first year student, and search about, not knowing the names of any building. How many people know the names of the buildings on campus, except for their dorm, the first year? Shoot, I taught at diversion. If you teach a lot of majors and non-majors, as I did, one of the most amusing things is the way that non-majors for a particular building never know the names of the other buildings. So they could have walked past this building 5,000 times, and they will not know its name, regardless of the fact that it's like above the door, but they will not know its name. They will see the name in their course schedule, and they will be baffled, and they'll wander around campus, find every building that has the same first initial until they find yours. And so the first day of class for them, is just going to be this. Students are going to come in, sweaty and falling all over themselves and go, I couldn't find it, right? And you say, all right, cool, it's first day. I know, I get it. But the point is that they seem to think for the first year students that they are going to be able to riffle down all the buildings on campus by name on this sheet, identify the closest one to them, because remember, no map, and go and refill their water bottle. Crisis solved. I'm sitting there and I'm looking, and these are the only things in our packet. Only things. And I'm like, and I look over at Anthony. He's looking over at me, and you can, and same thought, right? And the thought balloon between us, like, they've lost their fucking minds. So, question. How about you? I mean, a lot of you have seen the movie Office Space, right? Not a comedy. Agreed? Yes. So, talk to me. Tell me your glimpse of institutional crazy hell. I'm curious. We could all use a little of this diversion. Sherry. Talk to you later.